I am Julian, and I am 25 years old. On what was supposed to be a quiet, peaceful Christmas morning, I woke up to discover that my own parents had stolen my high-end computer workstation and completely emptied my life savings. They did this just to buy my older brother a down payment for a luxury condo he had absolutely no business living in. While I was standing there in our living room, staring at the empty space on my desk where my livelihood used to sit, and begging for my own money back just so I could pay my upcoming rent, my father looked me dead in the eye and said the words that broke our family forever. He said, "Your brother needs this more than you. Stop being selfish and think about the family." They literally laughed it off, completely dismissing my panic right in front of the twinkling Christmas tree. But there was one massive thing they didn't know. The massive financial firm my father worked for was about to be acquired, and I was the senior cybersecurity consultant hired to audit his entire department. And now, they are desperately begging me not to press charges, not to ruin their pristine reputation, and to save them from total financial ruin. Before I tell you exactly how I destroyed their perfect little illusion and took back everything they stole from me, hit that like button if you believe in justice and setting hard boundaries. And don't forget to let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Your support means the world to me. Now, let's go back to where this absolute nightmare actually began. I still remember the smell of cinnamon and pine that morning. It is funny how your brain holds onto the most mundane, comforting details right before your entire world shatters into a million jagged pieces. For 2 solid years, I had been saving up every single penny I could legally get my hands on. I was working freelance tech support and back-end coding, taking grueling night shifts and debugging incredibly messy code for startups just to build a small nest egg. My dream was incredibly simple. I wanted to move into a quiet apartment, get away from the constant, suffocating tension of my childhood home, and maybe just breathe for the first time in my life. I had just purchased a custom-built, incredibly powerful workstation. It wasn't a toy for playing video games. It was my livelihood. It was the very machine I used to pay my bills, handle my freelance clients, and climb my way out of the toxic dynamic of my family. I had even paused my 401k contributions just to save enough cash to afford this machine and my future security deposit. My brother, Sebastian, is 28. In my family, he is the undisputed golden child. He is the kind of guy who could set a house on fire, and my mother would somehow blame the match for being too flammable. Growing up, absolutely everything revolved around his needs, his potential, and his future. I was just the backup plan. I was the quiet kid who never made trouble and therefore never required attention or resources. There was no college fund for me. Any money my parents managed to save went straight into Sebastian's expensive private university tuition, which he ultimately dropped out of anyway after 3 semesters of partying. When he got a DUI at 21, my parents drained their emergency fund to hire an expensive lawyer to keep his record clean. When I needed braces, my mother told me to learn to smile with my mouth closed because they simply didn't have the budget. I was a textbook glass child. I was entirely transparent to them unless they needed something from me. I walked downstairs that Christmas morning wearing my usual flannel pants and an oversized hoodie, expecting the standard fake holiday cheer. You know the drill. The forced smiles, the obligatory gift exchange of socks and gift cards, the tense breakfast where we all pretended we were a happy, functional family. Instead, I found my parents sitting rigidly at the kitchen table. They were fully dressed in their Sunday best, and there was a thick white envelope sitting directly in front of my father. He pointed to the chair across from him and told me to sit down in a voice that left absolutely zero room for argument. My mother reached across the wooden table and patted my arm with this sickly sweet, condescending look that I had grown to despise. She told me they had to make a very hard decision about family priorities over the last few days, and she hoped I would understand that it was all done out of love. My father pushed the envelope toward me. I opened it, my hands slightly shaking from the sudden shift in the atmosphere. Inside was a printed bank statement for my personal savings account and a pawn shop receipt for my workstation. I stared at the papers, my brain entirely unable to process the math or the reality of what I was holding. My account, which had taken me 2 grueling years of 70-hour work weeks to build, was drained to zero. I looked up, my voice barely a whisper, and asked them why there were massive withdrawals on my account and where my computer was. My mother sighed heavily, rolling her eyes as if I were a toddler throwing a tantrum in a grocery store. She actually used her sweet, sing-song voice to tell me that they had sold it. She explained that Sebastian had found a beautiful luxury condo downtown, and he needed the down payment immediately to secure the real estate before someone else bought it. She told me that family helps family, and since I was living under their roof rent-free, it was my obligation to contribute to my brother's future. I asked them how they could possibly justify taking my property and my money without asking. I asked them how they got into my bank account. My father didn't even blink. He leaned forward, crossing his arms over his chest. He reminded me that my account was originally a joint student account he had opened for me when I was a teenager, and he had simply gone to the teller and transferred the funds out. He told me that Sebastian's situation was serious, that he needed stability to start his life, and that my freelance hobby could wait. Then, my father pulled a second document from his leather portfolio. It was a lease agreement. He slid a pen across the table and tapped the signature line. He told me that because Sebastian didn't have the credit score for the condo, and because I had meticulously built up excellent credit over the last 5 years, I needed to sign as his financial guarantor. He looked at me with pure, unadulterated disdain. He said if I couldn't support the family and sign that paper right this second, it was time I packed my bags, got out of his house, and found somewhere else to stay. I didn't yell. I didn't flip the kitchen table or scream at the top of my lungs. I just felt a cold, hollow emptiness spread from my stomach all the way up through my chest. I looked at the twinkling lights on the Christmas tree behind them. I looked at the neatly wrapped boxes that were mostly empty decorations meant to look good for the neighbors. And I realized they did not see me as a son. They never had. They saw me as a resource, an ATM, a disposable tool to fund their favorite child's reckless lifestyle. I pushed the guarantor paper back across the table. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. I told them I was leaving. My mother instantly gasped, clutching her chest and calling me dramatic. She started crying on cue, telling me I was ruining Christmas and breaking her heart. My father stood up, towering over me, and shouted that I needed to act like a man and take responsibility for my blood. I turned my back on them. I walked upstairs to my small bedroom, grabbed a single duffel bag, and packed a few days' worth of clothes, my phone charger, and my essential documents. I left my house keys on my empty desk right next to a short, honest note. The note simply read, "You didn't just steal my money today. You lost your son. Do not ever contact me again." I didn't argue on the way out. I didn't plead for fairness. I just walked out the front door into the freezing, blinding snow. As I trudged down the icy sidewalk, the cold wind biting fiercely at my face, I pulled out my phone and checked my banking app. It was true. The money I had starved myself to save was entirely gone, replaced by a single withdrawal labeled Family Assistance Transfer. But right below that transaction, a new notification caught my eye. It was an urgent alert from a major credit monitoring bureau. Someone had just initiated a hard inquiry on my social security number. I stopped dead in my tracks in the middle of the snowy street. I thought the absolute worst of this nightmare was over by leaving that house. I thought walking away was the hardest part. I was so incredibly wrong. I spent the first few hours wandering aimlessly around the city, the heavy snow soaking completely through my boots and freezing my toes. I sat on a bench near a closed coffee shop, trying to process the magnitude of the betrayal. Finally, when I couldn't stop shivering, I called my old college roommate, Derek. Derek is a profoundly good guy. He is the kind of friend who represents the family you choose for yourself. He didn't ask a million probing questions when I showed up on his doorstep 2 hours later, looking like a frozen, traumatized stray dog holding a single duffel bag. He just took one look at my face, tossed me a thick woolen blanket, pointed to his lumpy living room couch, and handed me a steaming cup of black coffee. Derek's apartment smelled faintly of stale pepperoni pizza and cheap lavender laundry detergent. But to me, in that exact moment, it felt like a billionaire's fortress. Sitting on that sagging couch with my hands wrapped around the warm mug, My phone started buzzing relentlessly on the coffee table. The screen lit up with text after text. The barrage had begun. First, it was my mother. She demanded to know where I was, typing in all caps that I was being completely unreasonable and ruining the family holiday. She told me that Sebastian was incredibly stressed because of my selfishness. Then came a long, furious text from my father. I read it word for word. "You think you can just walk away from this family? Family isn't a choice, Julian. You owe us for putting a roof over your head and feeding you for 25 years. You will come back here, apologize to your mother, and sign that lease. Stop playing the victim." I didn't reply to a single word. I just sat there, reading the messages, letting the venom sink deeply into my pores. Then Sebastian texted. There was no apology, of course. Just sheer, unadulterated entitlement. "You made Mom cry on Christmas over some stupid money. Grow up, Julian. I needed that down payment for my future. You'll make the money back eventually. Don't be such a cheapskate." I opened Instagram out of sheer morbid curiosity, and there it was at the very top of my feed. Sebastian had just posted a perfectly curated, filtered photo of himself standing in an empty, high-end apartment with gorgeous floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. He was holding a glass of champagne. The caption read, "Finally moving up in the world. Couldn't have done it without my amazing family supporting my dreams. Hashtag family first, hashtag blessed, hashtag new beginnings." I stared at the hashtag, family first. The hypocrisy was so thick it actually made my stomach turn violently. I took a screenshot of the post. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with it yet, but a quiet, methodical, and extremely cold part of my brain was waking up. I took screenshots of every single text message from my parents. I downloaded the official bank statements showing the exact timestamp of the withdrawal. I started building a secure digital folder on my phone. Later that afternoon, my phone rang again. It was Aunt Beatrice. Beatrice is my mother's older sister, and growing up, she always played the role of the sweet, caring aunt who baked sugar cookies and listened to everyone's problems. I answered the call, desperately hoping for just a shred of sanity or validation from an adult in my family. Her voice dripped with warm honey. "Julian, honey, I heard what happened with your parents. I am so terribly sorry. You must be freezing out there all by yourself. Where are you staying? Let me come bring you a hot meal and some clean clothes." For a split second, my guard dropped. I almost gave her Derek's address. I almost leaned into that offered comfort because I was so desperately lonely. But the years of living in the shadows of my manipulative family had taught me to read between the lines. The slight, breathless urgency in her tone simply didn't match her sweet words. It felt calculated. I gave her a very vague answer, telling her I was at a cheap motel near the interstate highway. We hung up, and less than 45 minutes later, my mother texted me demanding to know why I was wasting my limited money at a motel instead of coming home to face my responsibilities. Aunt Beatrice wasn't an ally. She was a spy. She was a flying monkey sent by my mother to track me down. The harsh reality of my situation hit me like a freight train the next morning. Monday rolled around, the holiday weekend was over, and I was scheduled to deliver a massive code migration for a major tech client. Without my custom workstation, I was entirely crippled. I couldn't run the heavy processing software on my phone. I had to walk 3 miles in the freezing cold to the public library, log onto a sluggish, virus-ridden public computer, and try to piece together my work through my cloud backups. It was utterly humiliating. Every time a librarian walked by and glanced at my screen, I felt like a trespasser pretending to be a professional. To make matters infinitely worse, a toxic coworker named Marcus caught wind of my technical difficulties. Marcus had always been insanely jealous of my output and my relationship with upper management. He immediately saw blood in the water. He started CCing my manager on internal emails, passive-aggressively offering to take over Julian's migration project since he clearly lacks the reliable hardware and personal stability to meet our company's professional standards. I was fighting a brutal war on 2 fronts. I sat in that quiet library, staring at the painfully slow monitor, gripping the edge of the wooden desk until my knuckles turned stark white. The sheer pressure of potentially losing my primary income on top of losing my savings and my family threatened to break my mind. But instead of breaking, I focused entirely on the rage. I channeled every ounce of anger into my fingertips. I typed out lines of complex code with a manic, obsessive precision. I was not going to let Marcus steal my project, and I certainly was not going to let my parents turn me into a homeless, unemployed statistic. On Wednesday, the tension finally boiled over into a public spectacle. I had managed to borrow an old, clunky laptop from Derek and went directly into the corporate office to present my finished project in person to secure my contract and my salary. I was sitting in the sleek, glass-walled lobby of my building, going over my presentation notes, when the automatic sliding doors opened. My parents walked in. Aunt Beatrice had clearly done some deep digging and found out the exact address of my workplace. My father marched straight across the marble floor toward me, his face red with suppressed anger, while my mother trailed closely behind him looking appropriately devastated and dramatic. Right there in the lobby, with two receptionists and several of my coworkers watching closely, my father slammed a folded piece of paper onto the glass coffee table in front of me. "You left without signing the guarantor agreement," he growled, keeping his voice low but incredibly menacing. "The leasing office needs it by noon. You are going to sign it right now, or I will walk upstairs to your manager's office and have a very long conversation about your character and your total lack of integrity." He genuinely thought the threat of public humiliation in my professional environment would make me fold. He thought I was still the terrified little teenager who used to hand over his summer job money so Sebastian could buy concert tickets. I stood up slowly. I didn't whisper. I didn't cower. I spoke clearly, projecting my voice so the security guard standing near the front desk could hear every single word I said. "You stole my life savings and sold my personal property to fund a condo for a 28-year-old man," I said, staring directly into my father's eyes. "If you do not turn around and leave this building in exactly 10 seconds, I am having security physically remove you for trespassing. And then I am going straight to the police station to file felony theft charges against both of you." My mother gasped loudly, clutching her pearl necklace like a bad soap opera actress. "Julian, how can you speak to your own father that way? Have you lost your mind?" "5 seconds," I said, my voice completely devoid of any emotion. I did not break eye contact with my father. His jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth would crack. He saw the cold, dead, absolute look of finality in my eyes and realized the control he had wielded over me for 25 years was completely gone. He grabbed my mother's arm roughly, muttering that I was a massive disappointment and a disgrace to the family name, and they stormed out of the lobby through the sliding doors. I sat back down on the leather sofa, my heart hammering violently against my ribs. I had won the immediate battle and I had protected my job. But I knew the war was just starting. I opened Derek's borrowed laptop to calm my nerves, clicking into my personal email to check for client messages. Sitting at the very top of my inbox was an automated message from a luxury car dealership. The subject line read, "Congratulations on your new Porsche 911. I stared at the screen, the blood draining completely from my face, my vision blurring at the edges. My parents hadn't just stolen my savings. They had stolen my entire identity. The moment I saw that email subject line, the air in the corporate lobby felt entirely too thick to breathe. A Porsche 911. The sticker price on one of those luxury vehicles is easily over $100,000. It's enough to buy a nice house in some states. I grabbed my phone and stepped outside into the freezing courtyard, my hands shaking so violently I could barely unlock the screen. I dialed the phone number listed in the email footer for the dealership's finance department. The phone rang 3 times before a woman named Valerie answered. I kept my voice incredibly level, fighting down the massive wave of panic rising in my throat. I told her my name was Julian, I provided my email address, and I explained that I had just received a confirmation email about a vehicle purchase that I absolutely did not authorize. Valerie sounded confused at first, then slightly defensive, as if I were a buyer suffering from sudden buyer's remorse. I heard the clicking of her keyboard as she pulled up the digital file. Sir, the finance application was submitted online 3 days ago. It was immediately approved based on your excellent credit score and your income verification. We have high-resolution copies of your Social Security card and your driver's license on file. The vehicle was finalized and picked up yesterday evening. Who physically picked it up? I demanded, the horrifying pieces falling into place with terrifying speed. Let me check the delivery release form, Valerie said, the typing echoing sharply in my ear. It says, Sebastian. He stated he was your older brother, and that you were stuck at work closing a big deal. So you authorized him to sign the final delivery papers and drive the vehicle off the lot as a surprise gift for the family. I closed my eyes, leaning heavily against the brick wall of my office building. Sebastian. He hadn't just used the cash they stole for his luxury condo. He had taken my pristine identity to finance a 6-figure luxury sports car just to complete his fake, wealthy guy persona. I thanked Valerie, told her explicitly and clearly that the loan was completely fraudulent and a result of identity theft, and hung up. I stood in the bitter cold for a long time. My own brother had committed a massive felony against me, and my parents had undoubtedly facilitated it. But the burning question remained. How on earth did he get my physical Social Security card? I always kept it locked inside a small, heavy fireproof safe hidden in the back of my closet at my parents' house. The only person on the planet who knew where I hid the tiny spare key for that safe was Aunt Beatrice. She had helped me move my furniture a year ago and saw me put the key taped under a specific desk drawer. I needed solid proof. I couldn't just throw wild accusations around, not with $100,000 liability hanging over my head. I needed irrefutable, undeniable evidence. I decided to set a trap. I called Aunt Beatrice back later that evening. I purposefully made my voice sound exhausted, defeated, and on the verge of tears. I told her I had moved from the motel and was now staying at a specific apartment complex on the far north side of town. A complex I had absolutely zero connection to. I told her I was scared, that my credit was acting weird, and I didn't know what to do about the guarantor papers. She cooed over the phone, telling me everything would be okay, promising that family always forgives, and swearing to keep my location a total secret from my parents. 2 hours later, I drove Derek's beat-up sedan to that exact apartment complex and parked across the street, hiding in the dark shadows of the parking lot. Sure enough, 40 minutes later, my father's familiar silver SUV pulled aggressively into the lot. My mother and father got out, marching up to the leasing office window, aggressively demanding to know which unit I was in. I recorded a crystal-clear video of them from the dark cabin of the car. Aunt Beatrice was officially a traitor. She had handed over my fake location instantly, and I had absolutely no doubt she had handed over the location of the spare key to my safe so Sebastian could steal my Social Security card. I added the video to my digital folder. The dossier was growing rapidly. But I needed the final nail in the coffin regarding the Porsche. The next morning, I took the city bus out to my old neighborhood. I felt like a ghost haunting my own past life. I walked directly up to the pristine house of Mrs. Higgins, our elderly next-door neighbor. Mrs. Higgins was the undisputed gossip queen of the subdivision. Nothing happened on our street without her documenting it, discussing it, and spreading it. I knocked on her front door, and when she saw me, her face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Julian, oh, it is so incredibly wonderful to see you," she beamed, pulling me inside her warm, floral-scented living room. "Your father has just been bragging about you non-stop to anyone who will listen. You are such a generous young man." I forced a polite smile, my stomach twisting into violent knots. "What exactly has he been saying, Mrs. Higgins?" She chuckled, pouring me a cup of hot tea. "Oh, he told the whole neighborhood association at the meeting how amazingly well you're doing in the tech industry. He said you got a massive bonus and bought your brother that gorgeous new Porsche as a housewarming gift for his new condo. He even showed it off in the driveway yesterday to Mr. Peterson." "Did he?" I said, keeping my voice perfectly steady, acting mildly surprised. You know, I actually lost my phone recently and lost all the pictures of the car being delivered to the house. By any chance, did your security cameras catch the delivery? Mrs. Higgins waved her hand dismissively. Oh, honey. My Ring camera catches absolutely everything. She pulled up the security app on her iPad and scrolled back to yesterday. There it was in crisp, high-definition video. Sebastian pulling smoothly into the driveway in a gleaming, brand-new black Porsche 911. My father walking out the front door, puffing out his chest with pride, shaking Sebastian's hand, and loudly declaring to Mr. Peterson across the street, "My youngest boy bought it for him. Kid makes too much money for his own good." I asked Mrs. Higgins to email me the video clip right then and there, pretending I wanted it for a digital family scrapbook to surprise my dad later. As soon as the large video file hit my inbox, I thanked her, left my tea untouched, and walked out. I didn't go back to Derek's apartment. I walked straight downtown to the local police precinct. I sat in a hard, uncomfortable plastic chair in the waiting room for 2 hours until a fraud detective finally called me to his messy desk. I didn't cry. I didn't act hysterical. I simply opened my laptop and presented him with the dossier. I showed him the bank transfers exactly matching the condo down payment amount. I showed him the forged guarantor lease my father tried to force me to sign. I showed him the fraudulent Porsche loan application, the email correspondence from Valerie at the dealership, and finally, the undeniable video of my father bragging about the car I supposedly bought. I filed a comprehensive police report for grand theft and felony identity fraud, explicitly naming my brother Sebastian, my father Richard, and my mother Margaret as conspirators. The detective looked at me, a mixture of deep pity and intense respect in his tired eyes. He gave me an official case number, a copy of the report, and told me to lock down my credit with all 3 bureaus immediately. Walking out of that precinct, the icy wind hitting my face, I felt the heavy, suffocating burden of victimhood fall completely off my shoulders. I was no longer their punching bag. I was the architect of their impending ruin. With the police report officially filed and in my hands, I knew I needed serious legal firepower to protect myself from the financial fallout. Derek, seeing how methodically I was handling the situation, introduced me to his uncle, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Harrison was a seasoned, highly respected attorney who specialized in complex financial disputes, fraud, and family law. He was a no-nonsense man in his late 60s who wore tailored suits and spoke with a calm, intimidating authority. I sat in his mahogany-paneled office, handed over a printed copy of the dossier, and watched as he reviewed the documents with clinical precision. When he finished, he took off his glasses and looked at me. We weren't just going to dispute the fraudulent charges with the credit bureaus. We were going to file a civil lawsuit against my parents and my brother for the stolen funds, emotional distress, and punitive damages. This maneuver would effectively freeze their assets the moment the suit went public. He also guided me through placing hard fraud alerts and total credit freezes on all 3 major credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. No one would ever be able to open a piece of mail in my name again, let alone buy a luxury car. Meanwhile, I stayed in close, daily contact with Valerie at the Porsche dealership. Once she saw the official police report case number, her attitude completely shifted from defensive corporate employee to a highly cooperative ally. She was furious that her dealership had been blatantly used to facilitate a felony fraud case. We coordinated our moves quietly. The dealership's legal team began the internal process to flag the vehicle for immediate repossession due to fraudulent financing, but we kept it entirely silent. Sebastian was driving around town, revving the engine of a stolen luxury car, completely oblivious to the massive legal crosshairs locked directly onto the back of his head. But dealing with my family meant dealing with a multi-headed snake. You cut off one head, and another one bites you. A few days later, I received an unsolicited text message from my cousin, Simon. Simon was a sleazy, opportunistic guy who always looked for a shortcut in life. He texted me claiming he had hard proof that Sebastian was the one who physically took my social security card from the safe, and he offered to testify for me in court. I called him immediately, needing to know what he knew. I can totally help you nail him to the wall, Jules, Simon said, his voice slick and conspiratorial. But I'm taking a really big risk going against the family like this. Your dad is going to be pissed. I think a couple of $1,000s would really help me feel secure about stepping up and testifying for you. I felt a massive wave of absolute disgust wash over me. He wasn't trying to help me get justice, he was trying to extort me for cash. What Simon didn't know was that I had installed an automatic call recording application on my phone the day I moved into Derek's place. Let me get this straight, Simon, I said slowly, making sure my pronunciation was crystal clear for the audio recording. You have evidence of a federal crime regarding identity theft, but you are intentionally withholding it from the police unless I pay you money to testify? Simon stammered, instantly realizing he had grossly misstepped. No, man, no, it's just compensation for my time and my travel. I'm sending this exact audio recording to the fraud detective handling my case right now. I interrupted, my voice devoid of any warmth. Do not ever contact me again. I hung up the phone and blocked his number, effectively neutralizing another toxic relative. I was cutting away the rot of my family tree, piece by piece, and it felt incredibly liberating. With the legal traps fully set and waiting to snap shut, I threw myself entirely back into my career. I delivered the massive code migration project for our client flawlessly. Marcus, the incredibly toxic coworker who had tried to sabotage me while I was working at the public library, attempted to take credit for the back-end architecture during the final executive presentation. However, my code was heavily watermarked, and my documentation was so thoroughly detailed that he ended up looking completely incompetent and foolish in front of the entire executive leadership team. Ms. Evelyn, the CEO of the tech firm, noticed everything. She is a sharp, brilliant, elegantly dressed woman who commands total respect just by walking into a room. She called me into her massive corner office later that week. Julian, the resilience you showed on this project under what I understand to be very difficult personal circumstances is truly remarkable, she said, leaning across her massive glass desk and steepling her fingers. I have officially fired Marcus. We do not tolerate vultures in this company. Furthermore, I am promoting you to senior cybersecurity consultant, effective immediately. I have a massive, highly confidential project coming up, a pre-acquisition audit. I need someone meticulous, someone who doesn't miss a single detail. I accepted the promotion on the spot. A massive salary bump, a senior title change, and my own office. The universe was finally beautifully balancing the scales. But the real, earth-shattering shock came when Ms. Evelyn handed me the thick, confidential dossier for the company we were acquiring. I looked at the embossed logo on the heavy folder, and my heart literally stopped beating for a second. It was Vanguard Financial, the exact firm where my father worked as a regional director. We are doing a total, uncompromising sweep of their internal systems, auditing every single department head for financial compliance before the merger goes public. Ms. Evelyn explained calmly. You will have full, unrestricted administrative access to their records, expense accounts, and client portfolios. I walked out of her office holding the folder, a slow, dangerous, and incredibly cold smile spreading across my face. I had the power to audit my father's entire career. I knew for a fact, from years of listening to him brag at the dinner table, that he often blurred the ethical lines with corporate expense accounts and client funds to maintain his wealthy lifestyle. He had built his entire massive ego on his corporate title and his perceived power. And now, by pure twist of fate, I held the absolute keys to his kingdom. That evening, a cold, formal email arrived in my personal inbox. It was from my father. Julian, this childish tantrum of yours has gone on long enough. Your mother is a wreck and crying every day. We are having lunch at the Silver Diner on Sunday at exactly noon. You will be there, and we will discuss exactly how you are going to fix the mess you made with the condo leasing office by ignoring their calls. Do not test my patience. I stared at the glowing screen of my laptop. He was still trying to give orders. He still thought he held the cards and could bully me into submission. I opened my legal folder, checked the repossession status update with Valerie, and reviewed my brand new, unrestricted audit credentials for Vanguard Financial. The storm was fully prepped. I hit reply and typed a single, simple sentence. I will see you on Sunday. I closed my laptop and looked out the window at the falling snow. I thought about what was coming. I thought about the look that would be on their faces when the illusion they built on my back finally shattered into pieces. I was stepping directly into the eye of the storm, but for the first time in my entire life, I wasn't afraid of the thunder. I was the one bringing the lightning. Sunday arrived with a bitter, biting cold that seemed to seep right through the soles of my shoes and settle deep into my bones. The sky overhead was a thick, unforgiving sheet of slate gray, promising another brutal winter storm. But internally, I was burning with a quiet, highly focused, and incredibly lethal energy. The location my father had chosen for this mandatory family meeting was the Silver Diner. It was exactly the kind of place my parents usually avoided like the plague. It was a local, run-down greasy spoon establishment on the far industrial edge of town. It was the kind of place with sticky, peeling laminated menus, cracked red vinyl booths patched with duct tape, and the permanent, heavy smell of frying bacon and old coffee hanging in the stagnant air. My father had chosen this specific location because it was miles away from their pristine, upper-middle-class neighborhood and their exclusive country club. He did not want any of his wealthy friends, his corporate colleagues, or his fellow homeowners association board members to accidentally witness him having to discipline his rogue, rebellious son in public. To him, image was absolutely everything. Image was his currency, his religion, and his entire identity. I arrived a full 45 minutes early. I wanted to completely control the environment. I did not want to walk into a space they had already claimed. I sat in a large corner booth facing the front door, a heavy ceramic mug of black coffee growing cold on the table in front of me. Placed neatly on the scratched Formica table was my genuine leather briefcase. Inside that briefcase were the physical copies of the dossier, my newly minted senior cybersecurity consultant business cards, and the preliminary, highly confidential audit files for Vanguard Financial. I watched the snow flurry aggressively outside the large glass window, feeling an absolute, icy calm wash over my entire nervous system. I was no longer the scared, desperate, financially ruined kid they had kicked out into the snow on Christmas morning. I was a grown man holding a loaded legal and professional weapon, just patiently waiting for them to blindly walk right into the crosshairs. Promptly at noon, the heavy glass door of the diner swung open, rattling the small brass bell attached to the frame. They walked in like they owned the entire building, treating the waitstaff like invisible peasants. My father, Richard, was leading the pack, wearing his tailored charcoal wool overcoat and an expensive imported cashmere scarf. His posture was rigid, projecting that exact same authoritarian aura he used to terrify his subordinates at the financial firm. My mother, Margaret, followed closely behind him, clutching a highly recognizable designer handbag like a shield and wearing a look of practiced, long-suffering martyrdom. She had her makeup done perfectly to look just a little bit tired, playing the role of the exhausted, heartbroken matriarch to absolute perfection. And then there was Sebastian. My older brother sauntered into the dingy diner wearing a brand-new leather bomber jacket that easily cost over $1,000. He was sporting a fresh, expensive haircut and a smug, completely untouchable grin that made my blood boil. He looked like a guy who had just won the lottery, which in a very real, very criminal way he actually had. He had won the lottery of my stolen identity and my stolen life savings. They spotted me sitting in the corner booth and marched over in a unified, aggressive formation. None of them said a simple hello. None of them asked how I was doing, where I was living, or if I even had enough money to eat a hot meal. They just slid into the booth opposite me, immediately crowding the space, throwing their expensive coats over the vinyl seats, and actively trying to establish physical and psychological dominance. My father did not even bother taking off his scarf. He leaned heavily across the table, invading my personal space, and lowered his voice into that dangerous, gravelly tone he used right before a major, earth-shattering explosion in our household. I hope you are ready to stop playing these ridiculous, childish games today, Julian. He began, tapping his heavy gold wedding band hard against the tabletop. I spent the entire morning fielding increasingly aggressive phone calls from the leasing office at Sebastian's new luxury condo. They claim you have not answered a single one of their emails regarding the guarantor verification process. You are making your brother look incredibly unprofessional in front of high-net-worth individuals, and you are embarrassing this family name. I will not tolerate this insubordination for another second. I just looked at him. I did not flinch. I did not look down at my hands the way I used to when I was a terrified teenager trying to avoid his wrath. I met his cold eyes and I held his gaze with a terrifying intensity of my own. I did not answer their emails because I did not sign that lease, I said, my voice perfectly level and entirely devoid of fear. I told you that on Christmas morning before you kicked me out of my own home. My mother let out a dramatic, breathy sigh, reaching across the table to try and grab my hand. I pulled my hand back sharply, pulling it entirely out of her reach. She looked highly offended, her eyes watering instantly on command. "Julian, honey, please," she begged, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Stop this terrible nonsense right now. You are tearing our beautiful family apart over a simple misunderstanding. Your brother needs to move his custom furniture into the unit by Tuesday morning. We used your little freelance money to secure the unit, but the landlord is demanding the final guarantor signature by the end of business today. You know your father and I do not have the liquid credit right now because of the expensive holidays and the property taxes. You are his brother. You share the same blood. You owe him this support. Do not be so greedy." "I owe him absolutely nothing," I said, my voice completely flat, rejecting her emotional manipulation entirely. "You stole my professional workstation. You drained my entire life savings account. You took 24 months of my blood, sweat, tears, and sleep deprivation so your favorite child could pretend to be a big shot in a luxury building he has absolutely no business living in." Sebastian scoffed loudly, leaning back in the booth and crossing his arms defensively. He looked at me like I was a piece of garbage stuck to the bottom of his designer shoe. "Oh, boo-hoo, Julian," Sebastian sneered, rolling his eyes to the ceiling. "You lost a stupid, nerdy computer and a few grand in cash. You can literally just write some more boring code and make it back in a month or two. You have zero overhead. You live like a monk anyway. I actually have a vibrant social life. I have a professional image to maintain. I need that condo for networking with real estate developers and investors. You just sit in a dark room all day. You do not need that kind of money." He reached into the deep pocket of his expensive new leather jacket and pulled out a heavy ring of keys. He casually, arrogantly tossed them onto the table right in front of me. The unmistakable silver crest of the Porsche logo caught the harsh fluorescent light of the diner, glinting brightly. He smirked at me, gesturing to the keys with a lazy flick of his wrist. "Look, little brother, if you are so insanely bitter about the cash, I will let you take the new ride for a spin around the block later," Sebastian offered, his tone dripping with profound condescension. "It handles like an absolute dream. Dad helped me pick it out at the dealership. But right now, you need to pull out your phone, call the leasing agent on speakerphone, and verbally confirm your social security number and your signature so I can finally get my condo keys. Stop acting like a spoiled, jealous brat." The sheer, unadulterated audacity of his words was almost breathtaking. He had stolen my identity. He had committed a major federal felony to buy a 6-figure luxury sports car in my exact name. And he was sitting across from me in a cheap diner, calling me a spoiled brat while dangling the stolen keys directly in my face. My father crossed his arms, nodding in firm agreement with Sebastian's assessment of the situation. "You heard your brother?" my father said, his voice dripping with absolute authority and a hint of a final warning. "Take out your phone right now. Make the call to the leasing office. If you do this, and you formally apologize to your mother for your horrific, disrespectful behavior over the last week, we will allow you to come back to the house for our traditional Sunday dinners. We will forgive this little rebellion. But if you walk out of this diner without making that call, you are permanently cut off. You will be dead to us, Julian. There will be no family support. There will be no future inheritance. There will be no college fund for any future children you might have. You will be entirely on your own in a very cruel world. They sat there, a completely united front of severe toxicity, staring at me, waiting for me to break under the immense pressure. They were so incredibly confident in their lifelong psychological conditioning. They truly, deeply believed that the threat of losing their approval and the threat of losing a potential inheritance would force me to my knees in submission. They thought I was still that desperate, lonely kid begging for scraps of their affection. I looked at my mother's fake, perfectly timed tears. I looked at my father's puffed-up chest and his arrogant scowl. I looked at Sebastian's highly punchable face and the stolen Porsche keys sitting on the scratched table between us. The trap was fully set, the bait was placed, and they had just gleefully walked right into the dead center of it. I did not reach for my smartphone to call the leasing office. Instead, I reached for the heavy brass latches on my leather briefcase. "I am not calling the leasing office," I said, my voice eerily calm, cutting through the ambient diner noise like a surgical scalpel. "But you are absolutely right about one thing, Dad. This little rebellion is completely over. Because as of today, I am entirely on my own. And you three are about to face the real world." I snapped the heavy brass latches of my briefcase open simultaneously. The sharp, metallic click echoed over the table, making my father blink in surprise. A tiny, microscopic fracture appeared in his highly confident facade. I reached inside, pulled out a thick, meticulously organized stack of legal papers, and placed them squarely in the exact middle of the table, right next to Sebastian's stolen Porsche keys. "What on earth is this garbage?" my father demanded, eyeing the thick stack of documents like they were a radioactive bomb. "That," I said, leaning forward slightly, resting my forearms on the table, "is a certified copy of the official police report I filed 3 days ago downtown. The charges are grand theft and felony identity fraud. It names all 3 of you as active, willing conspirators in a criminal enterprise against me." The color instantly and violently drained from my mother's face. She actually stopped breathing for a full second, her hand flying up to cover her mouth. Sebastian let out a highly nervous, high-pitched laugh, looking around the diner frantically to see if anyone else was watching our booth. "You are bluffing?" Sebastian stammered, his confident smirk completely dissolving into panic. "You did not go to the cops. You wouldn't dare do that to your own blood. You are just trying to scare us." "I did," I replied smoothly, my voice as hard as granite. "And I did not stop there." I finally pulled my smartphone out of my pocket. I unlocked the screen and opened my secure email application. I had spent the entire morning drafting a single, comprehensive, highly detailed mass email. I had attached the police report. I had attached the screenshots of Sebastian's arrogant Instagram posts. I had attached the forged guarantor documents. I had attached the fraudulent car loan paperwork provided by the dealership. And finally, I had attached the high-definition security camera video of my father loudly bragging to Mrs. Higgins about the car in the driveway. I looked at the 3 of them, my thumb hovering directly over the blue send button. "On the recipient list of this email," I explained, my voice steady, cold, and entirely merciless, "is the senior property manager of the luxury condo building. Next is Valerie, the senior finance manager at the Porsche dealership. Next is Aunt Beatrice, Uncle Dave, Cousin Simon, and every single prominent member of our extended family tree. And finally, just for good measure, I have included the entire executive board of the Homeowners Association in your pristine, heavily gated neighborhood." My father lunged forward violently, trying to grab my wrist across the table to stop me. "Julian, put that damn phone away right this second. Are you completely out of your mind? You will ruin everything." I pulled my hand back effortlessly, out of his reach, and pressed send. It is already gone. For 3 agonizing, perfectly silent seconds, the entire world seemed to stop spinning. And then the digital symphony of destruction began. My father's phone buzzed aggressively in his heavy coat pocket. My mother's phone chimed a bright, Cheerful notifications sound from inside her designer purse. Sebastian's phone lit up brightly on the table, displaying a new high-priority message alert. I sat back against the hard red vinyl booth, crossed my arms, and watched the sheer, unadulterated devastation unfold in real time. My mother frantically scrambled to open her phone. Her eyes rapidly scanned the glowing screen, reading the comprehensive email I had just blasted to everyone she knew and cared about impressing. A choked, horrifying sob escaped her throat. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hands shaking so violently she almost dropped the device. Aunt Beatrice just replied. She copied the whole family on her response. She's saying we are criminals and we belong in federal jail. Julian, how could you do this to my social reputation? The HOA president is on this email chain. I can never show my face at the club again. Sebastian was staring at his own screen, his jaw practically hitting the sticky table. "The landlord," he said, his voice cracking violently like a terrified teenager's. "The landlord just emailed back. They are formally voiding the lease immediately due to confirmed fraudulent activity. They are keeping the down payment pending an active police investigation. I have nowhere to live. My stuff is sitting in moving trucks outside the building right now." My father completely ignored his buzzing phone. His face had turned a dangerous, alarming shade of deep purple. The thick veins in his neck and forehead were bulging against his skin. He was absolutely furious, pushed completely past the point of rational thought. He slammed both his heavy fists down on the diner table, rattling the coffee mugs and making the silverware jump. "You vindictive, ungrateful, psychotic little piece of trash," my father hissed, spitting the venomous words directly at me. "You think you can destroy this family and just walk away scot-free? You think a flimsy police report makes you invincible? I know highly influential people, Julian. I am a regional director at a major financial institution. I know exactly what tech firm you contract for. I will call your senior manager tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp. I will personally ensure that your reputation in the technology industry is completely and utterly obliterated. You will never write another line of code in this city again. I will make sure you are fired, blacklisted, and buried in legal debt before the end of the business day." He sat back against the booth, breathing heavily, looking at me with pure hatred. He truly believed he had just played his ultimate trump card. He thought he still held the absolute power to crush my livelihood and starve me out. I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was a cold, highly predatory smile. I reached back into my open briefcase and pulled out one final, heavy, meticulously bound folder. It was heavily embossed with the shiny gold corporate logo of Vanguard Financial. I slid it slowly across the table until it rested directly in front of his shaking hands. "You should probably check your corporate email before you make any more threats about my career, Dad," I said quietly, enjoying the sheer confusion washing over his red face. He looked down at the folder, instantly recognizing his own company's highly classified branding. His brow furrowed in deep, troubled confusion. He opened the heavy cover. Sitting right on top was a certified copy of my new, permanent employment contract, signed personally by Ms. Evelyn, the CEO. Right below that contract was the official, legally binding notice of the pre-acquisition corporate compliance audit. As of Friday afternoon, I was officially promoted to senior cybersecurity consultant at my firm, I explained, watching his arrogant eyes widen in sheer horror as he read the legal documents. My very first assignment as the team lead is a massive, highly comprehensive, uncompromising compliance audit of Vanguard Financial, ahead of a hostile corporate takeover. I have been formally granted full, unrestricted, Tier 1 administrative access to your entire department's internal servers, your emails, and your financial ledgers. My father stopped breathing. The aggressive, domineering posture completely vanished in a millisecond, replaced by sheer, unadulterated terror. "I spent last night doing a preliminary sweep of your specific division," I continued, leaning in close so only he could hear the poison in my voice. "I looked deeply at your corporate expense accounts. I looked at the client entertainment funds you have been solely managing for the last 3 years. I saw the highly creative accounting. I saw the lavish steakhouse dinners, the luxury golf trips, and the phantom consulting fees you authorize to maintain this wealthy, fake lifestyle you pretend to have. It took me less than 3 hours of digging to find over $40,000 in completely undocumented, highly illegal discrepancies. My mother stopped crying instantly and looked at my father in absolute horror. The threat of a ruined reputation was suddenly overshadowed by the threat of total financial ruin. Richard? What is he talking about? What did you do? My father could not speak. He was staring at me like I was a ghost, or a terrifying monster he had accidentally created and unleashed upon himself. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. If you ever threaten my career or contact my employers again, I said, my voice dropping to a lethal, deadly whisper, I will not just hand those damning audit findings over to the Corporate Acquisition Board. I will hand them directly to the SEC, the IRS, and the federal authorities. You won't just lose your fancy job, Dad. You will lose your corporate pension. You will lose the house. You will face a massive lawsuit. And you will absolutely go to federal prison. Do you completely understand me? He was completely broken. The arrogant, untouchable patriarch was gone, leaving only a terrified, aging, pathetic man realizing he was entirely at the mercy of the son he had abused, neglected, and stolen from. He slowly, mechanically nodded his head, completely unable to formulate a single spoken word. I stood up slowly from the booth. I picked up my briefcase and snapped the latches shut. I looked at Sebastian, who was still staring blankly at the voided lease email on his phone, completely paralyzed by the destruction of his future. I looked at my mother, who was silently sobbing into her shaking hands, realizing her pristine social standing and her financial security were completely dead. And I looked at my father, who was staring blankly at the Vanguard financial folder, realizing his entire life was over. Do not ever contact me again, I said. I turned around and walked out of the silver diner, pushing through the heavy glass doors and stepping back into the freezing winter air. The fallout from that Sunday afternoon at the diner did not happen all at once. It was not a sudden, fiery explosion that provided instant gratification. Instead, it was a slow, methodical, and agonizing demolition of their entire lives. It was like watching a massive building collapse in extreme slow motion, floor by floor. I didn't have to lift another finger. I just sat back in my new, comfortable office, drank my expensive coffee, and let the severe consequences of their own criminal actions do all the heavy lifting. The very next morning, the Porsche dealership made their highly anticipated move. Because of the official police report I filed regarding the stolen Social Security number, Valerie's aggressive finance department officially classified the massive auto loan as fraudulent. They initiated an immediate, highly aggressive repossession order. Sebastian, in his infinite arrogance, had parked the gleaming, six-figure sports car right in the center of the driveway of my parents' house, practically begging the entire suburban neighborhood to admire his fake wealth. According to Mrs. Higgins, who gleefully updated me via a highly detailed phone call later that afternoon, a massive, heavy-duty commercial tow truck pulled into the quiet, pristine subdivision at exactly 10 o'clock in the morning. The tow truck driver did not knock politely on the front door to ask for the keys. He simply backed his massive rig up the driveway, hooked the heavy steel chains directly to the front axle of the Porsche, and started the loud, whining hydraulic winch. Sebastian came sprinting out of the front door wearing nothing but a silk bathrobe and socks, screaming at the top of his lungs. He literally threw his entire body onto the hood of the car, crying hysterically and demanding the driver stop stealing his property. The tow truck driver, a massive guy who clearly did not get paid nearly enough to deal with the temper tantrums of spoiled rich kids, simply pulled out a metal clipboard and a highlighted copy of the police report. He announced, loudly enough for Mrs. Higgins and at least 3 other nosy neighbors standing on their porches to hear every single word, that the vehicle was being officially seized due to felony identity fraud and grand theft auto. Sebastian was forcefully instructed to slide off the hood, entirely humiliated and sobbing like a child, as the beautiful car was dragged down the street, scraping the pavement, and out of his life forever. The HOA rumor mill exploded with the force of a nuclear bomb. My mother's carefully crafted, decades-long image as the perfect, wealthy suburban matriarch was entirely incinerated by noon. She started receiving passive-aggressive text messages from the country club ladies, asking if they needed a charity donation to help with their legal troubles. But the real, devastating destruction was happening quietly in the corporate world. I strictly kept my word to my father. I did not proactively send his fraudulent expense reports to the federal authorities. I simply did my job. I submitted the unedited, highly accurate, mathematically indisputable compliance audit to the acquisition board at my tech firm. When Vanguard Financial's senior executive team saw the undeniable proof of Richard's creative accounting and embezzlement of client funds, they panicked entirely. By Wednesday afternoon, my father was publicly escorted out of his massive corner office by 2 armed corporate security guards. He had to walk past his entire department, carrying a small cardboard box of his personal belongings. They did not press criminal charges, likely wanting to desperately avoid a massive public relations scandal and a drop in stock price right before the merger was finalized. But they stripped him of his regional director title immediately. He was pulled into a brutal HR meeting and given a terrifying choice: face a highly publicized firing and a massive civil lawsuit to recover the stolen funds, or accept a forced, immediate early retirement with his corporate pension severely penalized and garnished to repay every single cent of the embezzled money. He took the forced retirement. He walked out of that building in total disgrace, his decades-long career ending not with a gold watch and a retirement party, but with a humiliating perp walk to the parking lot. With the massive corporate salary gone, the social prestige vanished into thin air, and their neighborhood standing completely ruined, the highly toxic family dynamic violently turned inward. They were like starving wolves trapped in a cage. They had no one left to blame, manipulate, or steal from, so they turned their rage entirely onto each other. Derek's aunt occasionally bumped into Aunt Beatrice at the local grocery store, and the vicious family gossip flowed freely. Without my income to steal and my quiet presence to use as a convenient scapegoat, my parents turned their furious rage onto Sebastian. My father viciously blamed Sebastian for the public humiliation of the tow truck incident in front of the neighbors, and for the total loss of the condo down payment money that was now locked in legal escrow. My mother blamed my father for getting caught embezzling, losing his highly lucrative job, and cutting off their lavish cash flow. And Sebastian, true to his incredibly selfish, narcissistic nature, blamed both of them for not hiring an expensive lawyer to protect him from me. Sebastian was facing a massive mountain of legal trouble because the police investigation into the identity theft was still actively proceeding. The dealership was aggressively pressing charges for the fraudulent loan origination, and Sebastian was staring directly down the barrel of a potential felony conviction that would ruin his life forever. In a desperate, frantic attempt to save himself from actually going to state prison, Sebastian demanded that my parents hire a high-powered, expensive criminal defense attorney. But they simply did not have the cash. My father's heavily penalized pension barely covered their current mortgage and their massive credit card debt. Furthermore, my savings that they had stolen were completely locked down by the condo property management, pending the outcome of the fraud investigation. So, they started cannibalizing their own lives. I heard through the family grapevine that they were forced to sell my mother's expensive jewelry, her designer handbags, and my father's prized country club golf memberships on the internet just to keep the lights on and pay the massive initial retainer for Sebastian's lawyer. The golden child, the boy they had sacrificed my entire life to protect and elevate, had finally become the heavy anchor that was dragging them all straight to the bottom of the ocean. And I watched it happen from a safe, comfortable distance, feeling nothing but a profound, unshakable sense of peace. 3 months later, the final nail was driven into the coffin. I walked into the county courthouse wearing a sharp, tailored, expensive suit that I had bought with my own hard-earned bonus. Mr. Harrison, my incredibly sharp attorney, walked right beside me, holding a thick leather briefcase filled with undeniable proof. We were there for the civil lawsuit against my parents and Sebastian. It was a civil damages hearing, primarily focused on recovering the exact monetary value of my stolen savings account, the custom workstation they had pawned, and the legal fees I had incurred trying to clean up the identity theft mess they created. They were already sitting at the defendant's table when I walked into the courtroom. They looked absolutely terrible. The stress had eaten them alive. My father had seemingly aged 10 years in just 3 months. His previously rigid posture was slumped and defeated, and he was wearing an old, outdated suit that no longer fit his rapidly shrinking frame. My mother looked frail and exhausted, her dark roots showing through her previously perfect blonde hair, her designer purse replaced by a cheap, worn-out canvas tote bag. Sebastian sat between them, refusing to make eye contact with anyone, violently bouncing his leg up and down in pure, unadulterated anxiety. The judge overseeing the case was a stern, no-nonsense woman with zero tolerance for manipulative family drama. She meticulously reviewed the mountain of irrefutable evidence Mr. Harrison provided. She looked closely at the bank transfer timestamps matching the exact hour they kicked me out. She reviewed the pawn shop receipts bearing my father's signature. She read the detailed police reports regarding the identity theft and the fraudulent Porsche loan. It was a completely open and shut case. When my father desperately tried to stand up and argue to the judge that the stolen money was simply taken as retroactive rent for me living in their house as an adult, the judge slammed her heavy wooden gavel down so hard it echoed loudly through the silent courtroom. She absolutely berated him. She stated clearly on the legal record that stealing a child's life savings to fund another adult's lavish lifestyle was not just morally bankrupt, but entirely legally indefensible. She ordered them to repay the entire $14,000 immediately, plus all of my attorney fees, plus severe punitive damages for the emotional distress and the damage to my credit score. As we walked out of the courtroom, victorious and legally vindicated, my father stopped me in the long marble hallway. He looked small, broken, and incredibly desperate. The man who had terrorized me my entire life was reduced to begging. "Julian," he rasped, his voice trembling with unshed tears. "We have to take out a massive second mortgage on the house just to pay the civil judgment and keep Sebastian's criminal defense lawyer on retainer to keep him out of prison. Please, I am begging you as your father. You've made your point. You've ruined us completely. Drop the civil judgment. Show some mercy." I looked at him, searching my soul for even a shred of pity, and found absolutely nothing. The well was completely dry. "I didn't ruin you," I said calmly, my voice echoing slightly in the hallway. "You ruined yourselves the morning you decided my future was entirely expendable. I just stopped letting you use my back as a stepping stone. Pay the judgment within 30 days, or Mr. Harrison will place a legal lien on your house and force a sale." I turned around and walked away, leaving them standing there in the cold marble hallway, completely utterly alone. A few weeks later, the ultimate horrifying truth about the golden child finally came to light. Aunt Beatrice, desperate to get back into my good graces and secure an invitation to my new life, left a rambling, frantic voicemail on my phone. She revealed a secret that blew my mind. She said that Sebastian hadn't just asked my parents to take out a second mortgage. When the local bank denied my father's loan application because of his forced retirement, his lack of income, and his ruined credit, Sebastian panicked. Behind their backs, he stole their personal information. He forged their signatures on a series of highly predatory, massive high-interest title loans, using the equity of their pristine suburban house as collateral. The golden boy had literally stolen the roof over their heads to pay for his own criminal defense lawyer and to keep himself out of jail. He had done to them exactly what they had allowed him to do to me. I didn't call Aunt Beatrice back. I simply deleted the voicemail and blocked her number. It wasn't my circus, and they were no longer my monkeys. With the massive settlement check deposited safely into my new, highly secure bank account, I finally achieved my simple, beautiful dream. I moved into a stunning, quiet, high-rise luxury apartment in the city, entirely funded by my own hard work, my legal victory, and the massive promotion I earned at the tech firm. I bought a brand new, even more powerful workstation. I adopted a rescue dog, a goofy golden retriever mix who greets me at the door every single day with the kind of pure, unconditional love I never once experienced growing up. A full year passed. The seasons changed, the snow melted, and the memories of that horrific Christmas morning began to fade into a distant, dull ache. I was thriving as a senior executive at Vanguard Financial's parent company, building a vibrant, healthy life filled with a chosen family like Derek, my brilliant lawyer Mr. Harrison, and my mentor Ms. Evelyn. One quiet evening, I received a handwritten letter in my secure P.O. box. The return address was a small, cheap apartment complex miles away from my parents' old, wealthy neighborhood. I recognized the cursive handwriting immediately. It was from my mother. I opened it slowly, sitting at my kitchen island. The handwriting was incredibly shaky, stained with what looked like dried teardrops. "Julian," it read, "I know you absolutely do not want to hear from me. We lost the house. The bank foreclosed after Sebastian took out those terrible loans in our name. Your father is working as a night security guard at a distribution warehouse just to pay for groceries. Sebastian moved to another state to avoid his probation officer, and he won't return any of our calls. I sit in this tiny, dark apartment every single day and think about the Christmas we threw you away for him. I am so incredibly sorry. We broke our family trying to save a boy who didn't care about us at all. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you have a good life." I read the letter twice. I didn't feel a massive surge of triumph, and I didn't feel a desperate, codependent need to rescue them from the poverty they created. I felt a profound, quiet, and absolute closure. I folded the letter, walked over to my home office, placed it in the paper shredder, and watched the sad words turn into meaningless confetti. I learned a massive lesson that day. Forgiveness does not mean allowing toxic, abusive people back into your life. It simply means letting go of the anger so you can finally live in peace. Later that week, during the first real snowfall of the new winter, I was driving my own car, a modest, highly reliable sedan I bought entirely with cash, and I found myself taking a slight detour past my old childhood neighborhood. I drove slowly past the house. The pristine lawn was completely dead and covered in dirty snow. A massive, ugly bank-owned foreclosure sign was hammered aggressively into the front yard. The windows were dark and lifeless. The house where I had been ignored, manipulated, and robbed was completely empty. I pulled over to the curb for just a moment, watching the snow fall on the roof. I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel the need to mourn the loss of a potential inheritance or a family that never truly existed. I felt an incredible, overwhelming sense of absolute freedom. I had won the custody of my own dignity. I put the car in drive, turned the heater up, and drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. I was finally going home. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to draw a hard, incredibly painful line in the sand to protect your own peace, your sanity, and your financial future? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey. Remember, family isn't just about blood. It's about mutual respect. And you always have the right to walk away from a table where respect is no longer being served. Stay strong.